The courtroom that morning was charged with an odd kind of electricity, the kind that hums just before lightning strikes. The audience filed in quietly, clutching their coffees, unaware they were about to witness the kind of meltdown that would later explode across every social media feed in America. On the docket was a minor dispute, a few $100s worth of damages involving a neighbor's car door. Nothing remarkable, nothing headline-worthy, until she walked in. Karen Wallace arrived late, her heels clicking across the polished floor like gunshots. Every step was a declaration of superiority. Her oversized designer bag swung from her elbow, brushing past the gallery as if clearing peasants from her royal path. She didn't just walk to the defendant's table, she arrived there, chin raised, posture stiff, the unmistakable aura of someone who had never been told no, and didn't plan to start today. Her bright pink blazer strained at the seams as she leaned against the table and muttered just loud enough for the audience to hear, "This better not take all day." Judge Judy's gaze lifted from her notes, unimpressed but attentive. It was a look she had perfected over decades, the calm curiosity of a lion deciding whether the creature in front of her was prey or a nuisance. Karen met the stare and smirked. "Good morning," she said, drawing out the words with a sugary condescension that could rot teeth. The bailiff's eyes darted to Judy. He'd seen this look before, the one that usually meant someone's ego was about to die a public death. Judy straightened the papers before her. "Ms. Wallace," she said coolly, "you're being sued by your neighbor, Mrs. Hernandez, for scratching her vehicle and refusing to pay for the repairs. Is that correct?" Karen tilted her head, clearly bored already. "Oh, if that's what she says. I told her I barely touched that car. Some people just want free money." She laughed, a loud, hollow sound that didn't quite echo but seemed to bounce off every wooden surface in the room. A few audience members exchanged glances, the kind of silent agreement that said, "She's in trouble." Judge Judy leaned back slightly, hands clasped. "Let's make something clear before we begin," she said. "You are here to answer questions, not to perform stand-up comedy." The warning was crisp, but Karen didn't hear it, or didn't care. "Of course, Your Honor," she said, that smirk still glued to her lips. "I'm sure you're very busy with real cases." The words hung in the air, heavy as thunder. The audience's collective inhale was almost audible. Judge Judy didn't blink. Her silence stretched long enough for Karen to fidget. Finally Judy spoke, softly. "I assure you, Ms. Wallace, this will feel very real to you by the time we're done." It was the kind of line that could freeze blood. Even the camera operators glanced up from their monitors. But Karen wasn't done performing. "I just don't want to waste everyone's time," she continued, gesturing broadly toward the audience. "This whole thing is ridiculous. I'm a professional. I work for the city. I don't have time for these daytime television theatrics." She emphasized the word television as if she were doing Judy a favor by showing up. The gallery chuckled nervously. Somewhere in the back someone whispered, "She's done." Judge Judy's tone didn't change, but her eyes hardened. "You work for the city?" she asked. "Doing what?" Karen brightened, proud of herself. "Public relations," she said, flicking her hair. "So I know a little about handling people." The arrogance was thick enough to taste. "Evidently not," Judy replied flatly. The audience laughed quietly, and for the first time, a tiny crack formed in Karen's expression. The plaintiff, Mrs. Hernandez, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She was small, tired-looking, her hands folded in her lap. When Judy asked her to explain what happened, she spoke with trembling sincerity. Her voice was soft, her details precise. How Karen's car door had dented hers, how she'd politely asked for help with the repairs, and how Karen had responded with laughter. "She told me," Mrs. Hernandez whispered, "that people like me shouldn't own expensive cars if we can't afford to fix them." A murmur swept through the audience like a cold wind. Karen rolled her eyes. "Oh, please," she said, interrupting. "She's exaggerating. I never said people like you. She's twisting my words." Judy's head snapped toward her. "You'll wait until she's finished speaking," she said sharply. The steel in her voice sliced through the air. Karen leaned back, crossing her arms. "Whatever," she muttered. The bailiff took a step forward. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Judy folded her hands, her tone lowering into that deceptively calm register that every longtime viewer recognized as the beginning of the end. "Ms. Wallace, did you just say whatever to me?" Karen laughed nervously. "Relax," she said. "It's just an expression. Don't be so sensitive." The words were gasoline on an open flame. For a moment, Judy said nothing. She simply stared. Then, in a voice so quiet it drew every ear forward, she asked, "Did you just call me sensitive?" Karen hesitated, then shrugged. Well, you're kind of acting like one of those, old hags who take everything too seriously. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the hum of the studio lights seemed to die. Mrs. Hernandez gasped. The bailiff froze mid-step. The audience sat motionless as if afraid breathing would set off an explosion. Judge Judy's face didn't move, but her eyes changed. The warmth vanished. What replaced it was clinical precision, the look of a surgeon before the first incision. Slowly, deliberately, she leaned forward. "You may want to choose your next words very carefully, Ms. Wallace," she said. Karen rolled her eyes again, trying to hold on to her smirk. "It's fine. You know what I meant." But it wasn't fine. Everyone knew it. The line had been crossed and the countdown had begun. For the next 47 seconds, Karen's arrogance would turn to ash. The stage was set. The cameras were rolling. And the old hag she'd mocked was about to remind the world exactly why respect is not optional in Judge Judy's courtroom. The room was still vibrating from Karen's last careless remark. Judge Judy didn't speak immediately, she didn't need to. Her silence was the kind that screamed louder than fury, the kind that made even the studio lights seem to dim out of respect. Karen, sensing she'd gotten a reaction, mistook that silence for weakness. She tilted her head and smirked, whispering just loud enough for the microphones to catch. "Whatever, old hag." The sound cut through the courtroom like a blade. A collective gasp erupted from the gallery, sharp and unified, followed by a ripple of whispered disbelief. Even the bailiff, a man who had seen it all, took a half-step forward out of instinct. Mrs. Hernandez's jaw dropped open, her trembling hands frozen midair. The smirk faded from Karen's face, but it was too late. The words had already been spoken, recorded, and sealed in history. Judge Judy's hands folded together slowly. She didn't look angry. She looked focused. "Excuse me," she said quietly. The tone wasn't loud, but it carried more power than a shout. The audience went dead silent again. Karen tried to recover, her voice wobbling. "It was a joke," she muttered. "People joke all the time. Don't be so uptight." A single eyebrow lifted. Judy leaned forward. "Did you just tell me how to feel in my own courtroom?" she asked, voice cool and surgical. The tension was suffocating. Karen crossed her arms, rolling her eyes again, doubling down on the very behavior that had doomed her. "You're overreacting," she said, her voice sharper now. "I'm just saying, if you can't take a little humor." "Humor?" Judy cut in, her voice now a low hum of controlled fire. "You call that humor? That wasn't humor, Ms. Wallace. That was contempt dressed up as personality." The audience murmured again, unable to contain the shock. Judy's voice didn't rise, it descended, each word landing heavier than the last. "In 25 years on this bench, I've seen arrogance, I've seen defiance, and I've seen stupidity," she continued, eyes locked on Karen. "You, Ms. Wallace, are the first person to combine all three into one dangerous package." Karen's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her confidence was slipping, replaced by a faint tremor in her jaw. She glanced at the cameras, realizing too late that her smirk, her attitude, her every word were being captured from a dozen angles. Millions would watch. Millions would remember. Judge Judy straightened, placing her hands flat on the bench. The movement was deliberate, final. "You don't get to insult the court and call it comedy," she said. "Not here. Not ever." The gallery was silent again, stunned, reverent, waiting for the hammer to fall. Judy's eyes narrowed. "The countdown has begun, Ms. Wallace. 47 seconds from now, the arrogance you brought into this room will be unrecognizable. And you'll wish you had chosen silence instead of wit." The bailiff stepped closer. The cameras zoomed in. The audience held its breath. Because what was about to unfold wasn't just justice. It was history. For a long, trembling second, nobody moved. Then Judge Judy stood. The sound of her chair scraping against the floor echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. Karen flinched. The gallery collectively leaned forward. That single movement, small, deliberate, shifted the entire balance of power. Judy adjusted her robe, her gaze locked on Karen, her tone dropping into something surgical and terrifyingly calm. "You think this is a joke?" she asked quietly. "You think calling me names makes you powerful?" The softness in her voice was more dangerous than a scream. Karen swallowed hard but still tried to maintain her defiance, forcing out a nervous laugh. "It's not that serious, Your Honor. You're acting like I committed a crime." Judy's expression didn't change. "No," she said, "you didn't commit a crime. You committed something worse in this courtroom, ignorance combined with arrogance. That's a combination that never ends well." Karen looked around desperately for support. None came. Even the bailiff's arms were folded tight, his stare fixed like stone. The gallery's murmurs began to build, a low current of disbelief and satisfaction. Judy reached forward, picking up the folder Karen had brought with her. The sound of paper rustling filled the silence. "These," Judy said, holding the stack high, "are not legal documents." She flipped through them one by one, her eyes scanning the titles. Pinterest links, blog posts, and something called Real Housewives Win Court Cases. This is what you call evidence? She tossed one of the pages down, letting it land with a slap. "This is garbage printed by people who think TikTok comments count as law." The audience gasped, laughter bubbling through the shock. Karen's face flushed deep red. "These are valid sources," she protested, voice cracking. "You can't just dismiss them." Judy's voice sliced through hers like a razor. "Did I give you permission to speak?" she snapped. Karen froze mid-sentence. The air seemed to vibrate. Judy leaned forward, her eyes burning with that cold, disciplined fury that had ended careers and silenced generations of fools. "You will not talk over me in my courtroom. You will not interrupt justice because you're allergic to humility." Karen tried again, her voice trembling. "I was just explaining." "Enough." Judy's gavel slammed once, echoing like thunder. "You have spent this entire morning explaining yourself to death. Let me educate you, Ms. Wallace. Respect isn't something you demand with noise, it's something you earn through truth. And you haven't earned a single ounce of it today." The audience broke into whispers, eyes wide, watching Karen's confidence disintegrate in real time. Her hands fumbled with her bag. Her voice faltered. The smirk that once defined her had vanished completely. Judy took a breath, her tone softening only slightly. "The difference between us, Ms. Wallace, is simple. You shout to feel strong. I stay silent because I already am." That line hung in the air, pure, devastating poetry of authority. Karen's shoulders sagged. Her eyes dropped to the floor. Judy sat back down slowly, reclaiming her throne. "Now," she said, "since you brought TikTok to my courtroom, let's bring reality to yours." The audience erupted into restrained laughter, applause flickering through the tension before the bailiff restored order. Karen sat frozen, realizing for the first time that she wasn't running this show, she was the lesson. Comment respect if you believe arrogance always meets its lesson, and share this if you think the world needs more Judge Judy moments like this one. The courtroom had gone still again, that kind of heavy silence that carries both fear and fascination. Judge Judy adjusted her glasses and reached for the second folder on her desk, the one the production assistants had quietly handed her before the hearing began. Karen watched, her breathing shallow, still trying to recover from the humiliation of having her so-called evidence exposed. She didn't know it yet, but the worst part hadn't even started. Judy opened the file and began to flip through the pages one by one, her expression unreadable. The rustle of paper was the only sound in the room. The audience leaned in unconsciously, the way people do when they sense something enormous is about to happen. Even the bailiff's posture changed, alert, ready. Karen's eyes followed every movement of the judge's hands. Finally, Judy spoke. "You've stood before other judges, haven't you, Ms. Wallace?" Karen blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" she said, trying to sound confident. Judy's gaze didn't waver. "Don't play dumb. You've been in court before, several times in fact." She tapped the file with one manicured finger. "And not as a witness. Not as a victim. As a defendant." A wave of murmurs swept through the courtroom. Karen's painted smile faltered. "That's not true," she stammered. "Those were misunderstandings." Judy's voice hardened. 3 citations for disorderly conduct. 2 separate restraining orders. One filed by a coworker, another by a property manager. A consumer complaint for fraudulent business practices under your company's name, Wallace Consulting. She turned the page. "And here's my personal favorite, online harassment involving fake reviews posted under multiple aliases. Do you want me to read the usernames aloud, Ms. Wallace?" The audience gasped. Someone whispered, "She's done." Cameras zoomed in on Karen's trembling hands gripping the edge of the table. Her earlier arrogance had evaporated completely. "That's not fair," she blurted. "Those people had it out for me. You can't bring that up, it's not relevant." "Not relevant?" Judy repeated, her tone rising like a slow-building storm. "You waltzed into this courtroom calling me an old hag, and acting like the rules don't apply to you, and now you want to talk about relevance?" She leaned forward, her eyes locked on Karen's. "Everything about your past is relevant, because it tells the truth you're trying so desperately to hide, that this isn't your first time weaponizing arrogance, and it won't be your last unless someone stops you." Karen's jaw dropped, but no words came. Judy continued, flipping another page. "You've made a career out of intimidation. Landlords, co-workers, neighbors, you've left a trail of misery everywhere you go. And every single time you tell the same story, they're lying. They're jealous. They're out to get me." She paused. "Do you hear yourself? It's never you, is it? Always the world conspiring against poor, innocent Karen Wallace." The gallery murmured again, louder this time. The cameras caught the close-up, Karen's mascara beginning to smear, her lip trembling, her breathing uneven. Judy's voice softened, but only slightly. "Do you know what I see when I look at this file?" she asked. "I see a woman who's been given chance after chance. People have tried to reason with you, warn you, guide you. And instead of learning, you've perfected the art of blame." Karen shook her head, whispering, "You don't know me." "Oh, I know you better than you think," Judy replied. "I've seen hundreds of versions of you. Different names, same story. The entitlement, the manipulation, the belief that consequences are for everyone else. You've spent your whole life mistaking fear for respect. But those days end here." The words hung like a verdict. The air felt charged, alive. Judy closed the file slowly, placing it on the bench with precision. "You've stood before other judges, Ms. Wallace," she said quietly. "But none of them finished what I'm about to start." The audience gasped as if on cue. Even the bailiff's lips parted in disbelief. Karen's mouth moved soundlessly, her entire posture collapsing inward. She looked less like the confident professional who had strutted in earlier and more like someone who had finally realized the walls around her weren't walls at all. They were mirrors. Judy leaned back in her chair, that measured calm returning to her voice. "You thought you were here to win money. You're here to learn something much more valuable. And I don't charge tuition, Ms. Wallace, just attention." Karen blinked, tears welling now. The gavel remained still in Judy's hand. She didn't need to use it yet. The silence she commanded was punishment enough. The entire courtroom sat frozen in that moment, caught between awe and fear, knowing they were witnessing not just justice but exposure. And then Judy's eyes narrowed slightly, signaling that the next sentence would be the one that lived forever in clips and headlines. "What Judge Judy says next," the narrator's voice would later echo over replayed footage, "will make even Karen's biggest supporters go silent." The moment stretched like an eternity. The file on the bench was closed, the evidence laid bare, and the silence that followed was no longer empty, it was heavy, vibrating with the weight of what was coming. Judge Judy looked at Karen the way a surgeon looks at a patient who refused the anesthesia. Her voice, when it came, was low, deliberate, devastating. "You called me an old hag," she began, every word sharp and controlled. "Let me remind you, this old hag built a career on something you'll never understand: discipline." The audience froze, hanging on her voice as though every sentence were a sentence of its own. Judy leaned forward, her elbows resting on the bench, her hands clasped loosely before her. "While you were busy collecting excuses, I was collecting victories. While you were busy blaming others, I was earning respect the hard way, by showing up, shutting up, and working twice as hard as anyone else in the room." Karen's eyes darted around the courtroom looking for sympathy. None came. Every face she met reflected the same thing: disbelief mixed with satisfaction. The mighty Karen Wallace, self-proclaimed professional and social media darling, was being dismantled in front of a live audience, and there wasn't a filter in the world that could save her. Judy continued, her tone still steady, every word a hammer on stone. "You came in here believing the cameras made you untouchable. You thought this was your stage. But the problem with arrogance is that it always mistakes attention for admiration." She paused. "You have plenty of the first. None of the second." The gallery murmured. The bailiff's lips pressed together to hide a grin. Judy went on, her rhythm flawless. "You lied about the damages, you lied about your past, and you lied to yourself thinking this was going to end in your favor. The truth doesn't need makeup, Ms. Wallace. It just needs a microphone, and right now it has one." Karen's breathing quickened. Her earlier defiance had drained from her posture, replaced by a visible trembling in her hands. "I didn't mean," she started, but Judy cut her off with a simple raise of her hand. "Don't waste another breath trying to fix the impression you made," Judy said. "You can't repair what you shattered. Not today. Not in this room." She leaned in closer, voice dropping to an almost merciful calm. "Do you know what happens when a person confuses cruelty for confidence? They lose both. And you, Ms. Wallace, just lost yours on national television." Karen's eyes welled up. Her lips quivered. I'm sorry," she whispered, the first apology she'd managed since she entered the courtroom. But it was too late. The apology wasn't for redemption, it was survival instinct. Judy didn't soften. "You're not sorry," she said plainly. "You're embarrassed. There's a difference. Embarrassment fades when the cameras turn off. Regret stays when the mirror turns on." The words hit like gunfire, short, precise, unforgettable. The audience sat completely still, the air thick with awe. Somewhere near the back, a spectator whispered, "She's legendary," and the entire row nodded silently. Judy stood again, drawing herself to her full height. Her presence filled the room. She looked at Karen one last time, not with anger but with absolute finality. "I don't enjoy humiliating people, Ms. Wallace," she said, "but I don't protect them from the consequences they build with their own hands either." She took a long breath and delivered the line that would echo forever. "In my courtroom," she said slowly, "respect is not requested. It's required." The gavel came down once, hard and clean. The audience erupted, not in chaos but in thunderous, righteous applause. The kind that comes from seeing justice done perfectly, surgically, without cruelty but without mercy either. Karen buried her face in her hands. The arrogance that once strutted into the courtroom had collapsed into something small, human, and broken. Judge Judy didn't look back. She simply turned, gathered her papers, and walked out as the sound of applause rolled on behind her like the roar of a storm finally breaking. 47 seconds. That was all it took. 47 seconds to turn arrogance into silence, and silence into legend. The sound of the gavel still echoed faintly when the applause finally died down. The courtroom that had once buzzed with arrogance and defiance was now filled with a stunned quiet. Karen sat motionless at the defendant's table, mascara streaking down her cheeks, the bravado gone, replaced by a hollow disbelief. Her hands shook as she tried to gather her papers, though there was nothing left to defend. Judge Judy remained seated, her face calm but unreadable, her power now resting not in anger, but in authority fully restored. "You may leave, Ms. Wallace," she said softly, the words simple but heavy enough to crush the air from the room. Karen didn't move at first. It was as if her legs no longer belonged to her. The cameras captured every second, the humiliated posture, the trembling breath, the quiet acknowledgement of defeat. When she finally stood, the sound of her chair scraping against the floor was painfully loud, like a closing door on the version of herself that had walked in only an hour earlier. As she turned toward the exit, she made the mistake of glancing at the audience. The looks she met weren't mocking. They were disappointed. There was no pity, no laughter, only the sober recognition of what happens when ego meets consequence. Karen lowered her eyes and left without another word. Judge Judy watched her go, then leaned back in her chair. She exhaled slowly, her tone soft but firm as she spoke to the room. "Respect," she said almost to herself, "isn't about liking authority, it's about understanding what happens when you ignore it." The gallery nodded silently. Even those who had come expecting entertainment left feeling they'd witnessed something deeper. Not just a viral moment, but a reminder. Mrs. Hernandez approached the bench timidly, clutching her small purse. "Thank you, Your Honor," she whispered. Judy gave her a nod. "You did the right thing," she replied. "And that's all that ever matters here." The cameras zoomed out. The audience began to disperse. But in every viewer's mind, those 47 seconds of truth replayed endlessly. Karen's insult. Judy's silence. The comeback that became legend. Because in that courtroom for one unforgettable afternoon, justice didn't just speak, it taught. If you believe arrogance always falls before truth, comment "justice" below, and subscribe for more moments where respect wins louder than words.